The elegy is one of the oldest poetic forms there is, but its history is a complicated one. For the last 500 years, elegies have been mostly associated with death and mourning. Since then, the subject matter has been what makes an elegy what it is, not the rhyme or meter. In that regard, it differs from the sonnet, the villanelle, and the ballad. In ancient Greece, elegy referred not to a genre or subject matter, but to a specific verse form, the elegiac distich. In classical Greece, the terms elegion and elegia simply denote verse in the elegiac meter. Regardless of content, however, elegios and the plural elegioi referred to sad songs sung to the accompaniment of a flute, a sung lament about death. Regardless of meter, this meaning, which is what we mean by elegy today, was in use by the 5th century. But it would take another 1,000 years for that to become the primary meaning. The term is also, of course, related to the word eulogy. Eulogy derives from ancient Greek. Eu means good, and logos means words. So eulogy simply means good words. Today, when we think of eulogies, we always associate them with speeches at funerals. They do many, often most of the same things elegies do. Up through the 19th century, you'll see the word eulogy in its original meaning. Characters in 19th century novels often talk about eulogizing other characters, and by that they simply mean praising them, giving them a good record. I'll come back to the relationship between elegies and eulogies in a few minutes. But first, let me explain the things elegies do. As I said, elegies are usually about death and mourning. There's no way to be exact about this, but I would guess that 7 or 8 out of 10 elegies in English are poems on the death of specific people. There's W.H. Auden's Elegy on the Death of W.B. Yeats, Paula Meehan's Child Burial, and many, many more. A significant minority of elegies are about the death or loss of a way of life, or about a group that has died. There are elegies for collective warriors who have died. There are elegies to anonymous soldiers, like Elegy for a Dead Soldier by Carl Shapiro, published in 1944 near the end of World War II, which begins, "A white sheet on the tailgate of a truck becomes an altar. 2 small candlesticks sputter at each side of the crucifix laid round with flowers, brighter than the blood, red as the blood of our apocalypse, hibiscus that a marching man will pluck to stick into his rifle or his hat." One of the best known elegies is the 18th century Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard by Thomas Gray. At the start of Gray's poem, we get a picture of the poet lingering in a churchyard, which is the English term for the small cemetery on the grounds of a church. The curfew tolls the knell of parting day. The lowing herd winds slowly o'er the lea. The plowman homeward plods his weary way and leaves the world to darkness and to me. Note that last line, leaves the world to darkness and to me. Gray's elegy does what most elegies do, and this is a crucial element of the form. It begins as a very private expression of mood and mourning. After the elegy's private beginning, which tends to focus on the feelings of the mourner, it usually goes on to talk about the qualities of the person or people who have died. At the end, elegies move from the person being mourned to the audience in an attempt to provide consolation or some official-sounding praise. Gray's poem ends with an epitaph, which reads much more like a public poem than a melancholy, introspective one. W.H. Auden does the same things in his In Memory of W.B. Yeats. The third section of that poem, 24 lines of iambic tetrameter, is an address to the earth, asking it to receive William Yeats. It moves to formal meter and regular rhyme after its more reflective and irregular form in the first 2 sections. And in the end, it goes beyond Yeats to mankind. Auden writing in a time of war, a war he found disgusting and dishonorable after England's appeasement of Hitler. He was writing in 1939 before the Allies started standing up to the Nazis and fascists. Ends with a plea. In the deserts of the heart, he writes, let the healing fountain start. In the prison of his days, teach the free man how to praise. I want to end this by tying the elegy back to the eulogy in this time of national and global mourning for those who have died from the COVID-19 pandemic. Many eulogies have been given. If you Google elegy or eulogy and COVID-19, you will find a lot of people trying to find a way to mark the passing of those lost to the virus, while also trying to make sense of it all. When the death toll in the United States reached 100,000 in late May, the New York Times filled its front page with the names of 1,000 of those who had died, and a simple phrase about each one of them. Many of those who they elegized or eulogized that way were ordinary people, like those in Gray's poem. I know a few people who sat down and read every name. I read them all myself. In these times, a form like the elegy seems to be needed to try to give some recognition of the many who have died and to try to make sense of what we are all going through.